Jack "Cactus" Kane rode into the dusty town of Red Gulch, clutching a crumpled wanted poster in his pocket for the dangerous outlaw Sam "Bloody Fang" McGraw. On that scorching afternoon, when the sun baked the ground like a frying pan, he stepped into the saloon where the sharp gaze of the barmaid Lilly caught him, promising either luck or serious trouble. What happened next, when his heart got tangled in a web of romance and betrayal, forcing him to balance between his bounty hunter's code and unexpected love? Stick around to find out how duty and feelings intertwine in this ironic tale, revealing lessons on loyalty without any extra promises. Hey there, listener. How's it going today, and where are you tuning in from? Jack "Cactus" Kane pulled his horse to a stop at the edge of Red Gulch, the kind of town where dust seemed to own the streets more than the people did. He had ridden hard for days across barren plains, chasing leads on Sam "Bloody Fang" McGraw, the outlaw with a $5,000 bounty that could set a man up for life. His spurs jingled softly as he dismounted, each step kicking up small clouds that clung to his worn boots like unwanted memories. The sun hung high, turning everything into shades of brown and gold, but Jack's mind stayed focused on the job ahead. He adjusted his hat to shade his eyes, scanning the few buildings that made up the place. A general store, a sheriff's office that looked half abandoned, and the saloon right in the center, like it was the heart of the whole sorry operation. Inside the saloon, the air hit him with a mix of stale whiskey, tobacco smoke, and the faint tang of sweat from hard-working folks trying to forget their troubles. Jack slid onto a stool at the bar, his coat brushing against the scarred wood counter that had seen better days. The place wasn't crowded, just a few locals nursing drinks and playing cards in the corner, their conversations low and guarded. He ordered a shot of whiskey, his voice rough from the trail, and let his gaze wander around the room for any sign of trouble or information. That's when the barmaid caught his eye. She moved with a confidence that said she owned the space, pouring drinks without spilling a drop while trading barbs with the patrons. Her name tag read Lilly, and she set the glass in front of him with a smirk that suggested she sized up every stranger who walked through those swinging doors. Jack couldn't help but notice how her apron hugged her figure just right, but he pushed the thought aside, reminding himself he was here for business, not distractions. He pulled out the wanted poster, unfolding it carefully on the bar, and studied McGraw's face again. The sharp features, the scar across one cheek, the eyes that screamed trouble. The barmaid glanced at it while wiping a glass, her expression unreadable, but something in her posture shifted ever so slightly. Jack took a sip of the whiskey, feeling the burn slide down his throat, and wondered if this town held the key to his payday, or just another dead end. As the afternoon dragged on, Jack struck up small talk with a couple of regulars, asking casual questions about strangers passing through without tipping his hand too much. One old-timer mentioned hearing about a rough character holed up in the nearby canyons, but details were scarce, laced with warnings about the dangers out there. Jack nodded, filing away the info, his fingers drumming lightly on the bar. The saloon's piano player started a lazy tune in the background, adding a layer of normalcy to the tense atmosphere. By the time he finished his drink, Jack felt the weight of the trail easing a bit, but his instincts told him Red Gulch had more surprises in store than just bad liquor. Lilly leaned against the bar, her sharp eyes sizing up Jack "Cactus" Kane as if he were a card in a poker game she already knew how to win. She slid another whiskey his way without him asking, her movements smooth, like she'd poured 1,000 drinks in this dusty Red Gulch saloon. Jack caught the glass, noting the faint scent of lavender clinging to her despite the room's haze of smoke and booze. He was here for Sam "Bloody Fang" McGraw, a man worth $5,000 dead or alive, but something about Lilly's quick wit and quicker smirk kept pulling his focus like a moth to a flame. "You gotta look like trouble follows you close," Lilly said, wiping down the counter with a rag that had seen better days. Her voice carried a playful edge, but Jack caught a glint in her eye that suggested she wasn't just making small talk. He grinned, leaning forward slightly, deciding to test the waters. "Trouble's my shadow, ma'am, but I'm the one who picks the fights." She laughed, a sharp, bright sound that cut through the saloon's low hum like a knife through butter, and tossed back. "Then you must be mighty tired of winning." Jack sipped his whiskey, letting the burn ground him as he steered the conversation toward his quarry. Heard of a fella named Sam McGraw passing through? He asked, keeping his tone light, like he was just another curious drifter. Lily's hand paused mid-wipe, just for a heartbeat, before she resumed cleaning with a shrug. Plenty of names float through here, stranger. Most ain't worth remembering. Her words were casual, but Jack noticed her jaw tighten, her gaze flicking toward the saloon doors as if expecting someone to barge in. The piano player in the corner switched to a slower tune, and the locals kept their heads down, cards slapping softly on their table. Jack leaned back, his spurs scraping the floor, and decided to push a little harder. Man like McGraw, with a scar like a lightning bolt, tends to stick in folks' minds. Lilly met his eyes then, her smirk fading into something unreadable, like a storm cloud passing over the moon. "You ask a lot of questions for a man just passing through," she said, her voice low but steady. "What's your game, cowboy?" Jack felt the air shift, like the moment before a gunfight, when everything goes quiet. He didn't answer right away, just studied her. Those green eyes that could probably talk a rattlesnake into curling up and napping. Was she hiding something? Or was she just the kind of woman who enjoyed keeping a man on his toes? He tipped his hat slightly, letting the silence hang. "Just a man looking for answers, ma'am." And maybe another drink. Lily's laugh returned, but it was different now. Less open, more like a door creaking shut. She poured him another shot, and Jack couldn't shake the feeling that she knew more about Sam McGraw than she was letting on. As the saloon's chatter picked up again, Jack's mind churned. Lilly was no ordinary barmaid. She carried herself like someone who'd seen the rough side of life and come out sharper for it. He'd met plenty of folks who could lie smoother than a river rock, but something about her made his gut twist in a way that had nothing to do with the whiskey. The wanted poster in his pocket felt heavier now, and he wondered if Red Gulch was about to deal him a hand he wasn't ready to play. The saloon's lamplight flickered as Lilly leaned closer to Jack, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that made the hairs on his neck stand up. "You're after my father, aren't you?" she said, her words slicing through the haze of whiskey and tobacco like a well-aimed bullet. Jack froze, his hand halfway to his glass, the wanted poster in his pocket suddenly feeling like a lead weight. Lily's eyes locked onto his, sharp and unyielding, but her lips curled into a daring grin that dared him to lie. He cleared his throat, buying time, his mind racing faster than a spooked Mustang. "Your father, huh? That's a hell of a family tree if Sam McGraw's the trunk." Lilly laughed, but it wasn't the warm, teasing sound from before. It was brittle, like glass about to crack. She stepped back, crossing her arms, her apron stained with the day's work, but her posture all business. "You think you're the first bounty hunter to waltz in here with a crumpled poster and a cocky grin?" she asked, her tone mocking but laced with something heavier, something personal. Jack leaned back on his stool, his spurs scraping the floorboards, trying to read the woman in front of him. She wasn't just a barmaid playing games. She was Sam McGraw's daughter, and that made her either a pawn or a queen in this dusty chess match. He decided to play it straight, at least for now. "Didn't come for trouble, Lilly. Just the $5,000 your old man's head is worth." Her eyes narrowed, but instead of anger, she let out a snort, shaking her head like he'd told a bad joke. "You're all the same," she said. "Chasing money, not sense. My father's no saint, but he's no devil either, just a man who made bad choices in a worse world." The saloon's piano had gone quiet, and the locals pretended not to listen, though Jack could feel their eyes darting his way. He studied Lilly, noting the way her hands fidgeted with the rag, betraying the confidence she wore like armor. Was she protecting Sam, or was there something else at play? "You don't seem too worried about a bounty hunter sniffing around," he said, testing her again. She smirked, leaning forward until her face was inches from his. "Maybe I know something you don't, Cactus. Maybe I'm the one you should be worried about." Jack's heart gave a traitorous thud, not from fear, but from the spark in her voice, the kind that could light a fire in a man's soul and burn him to ash. He'd hunted men across deserts and canyons, faced down guns and rattlesnakes, but Lily's mix of defiance and charm was a different kind of danger. He tipped his hat, hiding the unease creeping up his spine. "Guess I'll stick around to find out," he said, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. Lilly turned away to serve another customer, but her parting glance told him this game was far from over. As the saloon's noise filled the silence, Jack sipped his whiskey, his mind tangled in knots. Lilly wasn't just a complication. She was a walking contradiction, loyal to a father she didn't defend, but bold enough to challenge a man like him. The bounty on Sam McGraw was still his goal, but now it felt like he was chasing something else entirely, something that could cost him more than a missed payday. Jack sat alone in the corner of the Red Gulch saloon, the taste of cheap whiskey lingering like regret on his tongue. Lilly's revelation, that she was Sam McGraw's daughter, had hit him like a kick from a mule, and now his mind churned worse than a dust storm. He'd spent years tracking men for bounties, never hesitating to pull the trigger, but the thought of dragging Sam in now felt like betraying the spark in Lilly's eyes. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass, muttering to himself about the rotten luck of falling for a woman tied to his payday. The saloon was quieter now, the piano player gone home, leaving only the clink of glasses and the low murmur of drunks at the bar. Jack's fingers traced the edge of the wanted poster, now tucked back in his pocket, its promise of $5,000 mocking him. He'd always lived by a simple code: find the man, collect the reward, move on. But Lilly's laugh, her sharp tongue, her way of looking at him like she could see through his weathered hide, it all muddied the waters. He took another swig, the burn doing little to clear the fog in his head. Across the room, Lilly was wiping tables, her movements quick but distracted, like she was wrestling with her own ghosts. Jack caught himself watching her, noting how she brushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear, how her apron swayed as she moved. He cursed under his breath, wondering when he'd turned into a fool who let a woman's smile derail a job. "You're getting soft, Cactus," he grumbled, loud enough to earn a curious glance from a passing local. The man shuffled off when Jack's glare promised no conversation. He leaned back, his chair creaking under his weight, and tried to piece it together. If he hauled Sam in, Lilly would hate him. Maybe worse, she'd outsmart him before he even got the chance. If he let Sam go, he'd be walking away from enough money to buy a quiet life, maybe a small ranch somewhere far from this sun-scorched hell. The thought of settling down made him snort. He'd never been the type to plant roots, but Lilly's presence made the idea less ridiculous. He drained his glass, slamming it down harder than intended, and stood up, his spurs jangling like a warning. Jack stepped outside into the cool night air, the stars above Red Gulch sharp and unforgiving. He lit a cigarette, the smoke curling upward as he wrestled with his next move. Chasing bounties was all he knew, but chasing feelings, that was a trail he'd never ridden. Lilly was trouble, no doubt, but the kind that made a man question what he was really hunting for. He flicked the cigarette into the dirt, grinding it under his boot, and made up his mind to find Sam McGraw. Deal or no deal, he needed answers before his heart made a bigger fool of him. Jack tightened the cinch on his horse's saddle just as dawn broke over Red Gulch, painting the sky in streaks of orange that did little to warm the chill in his bones. He'd spent the night piecing together scraps of information from saloon gossip, pinning Sam McGraw's hideout to a jagged canyon 30 miles out. The trail would be rough, but Jack had ridden worse, and the $5,000 bounty still burned in his mind, even if Lilly's face kept creeping in to cloud it. As he swung into the saddle, the creak of leather was drowned out by the sound of boots crunching behind him. "Going somewhere without saying goodbye?" Lilly's voice cut through the morning quiet, sharp and teasing, as she stood with her hands on her hips, a worn satchel slung over her shoulder. Jack turned, his hat shading the surprise in his eyes. She wore a riding skirt, and a look that said she wasn't asking permission to tag along. "I know those canyons better than you know your own shadow," she said, stepping closer. "You'll get lost or snake-bit without me." Jack opened his mouth to argue, but the set of her jaw told him she'd follow whether he liked it or not. The ride out was long, the sun climbing higher and turning the air into a shimmering haze. Lilly rode beside him, her horse keeping pace, her chatter filling the silence with stories of Red Gulch's drunks and failed prospectors. Jack half listened, his eyes scanning the horizon for trouble, but her voice was a distraction he couldn't shake, like a catchy tune that stuck in your head. "You ever think about quitting this bounty game?" she asked suddenly, her tone less playful now. He grunted, keeping his gaze on the rocky trail ahead. Easier to quit breathing than to quit what pays. They stopped to water the horses at a trickle of a stream, the canyon's red walls looming closer now. Jack knelt to refill his canteen when a rattle broke the stillness, sharp and close. He froze, spotting the coiled rattlesnake not 10 feet away, its eyes glinting like it had a personal grudge. Lilly's hand shot out, grabbing his arm and yanking him back, just as the snake struck, missing his boot by inches. "Told you you'd need me," she said, her grin smug, but her grip lingering a moment too long. Jack's heart pounded, not just from the snake, but from the way her touch burned through his sleeve. By dusk, they reached the canyon's edge, where a faint trail of smoke curled up from a hidden camp. Sam McGraw was close. Jack could feel it in his gut. Lilly's chatter had gone quiet, her face unreadable as she scanned the rocks. He studied her, wondering if she was leading him to her father or into a trap. The bounty was within reach, but every step felt like he was riding deeper into something he couldn't control. He adjusted his gun belt, the weight of his revolver grounding him, and nodded toward the camp. "Stay close," he said, his voice low. Lilly just smirked, like she was the one giving orders. Jack's head throbbed like a blacksmith's hammer as he woke in a dim, musty shed, his wrists bound tight with coarse rope that bit into his skin. The last thing he remembered was sipping coffee by the campfire, Lilly's voice lulling him with some tale about a card sharp who lost his boots in a bet. Now, the bitter aftertaste in his mouth told him she slipped something into his drink, something strong enough to knock out a man who'd ridden through worse nights than this. He cursed under his breath, his voice hoarse, and yanked at the ropes, each tug a reminder of how he'd let his guard down for a pair of sharp green eyes. The shed door creaked open, and Lilly stepped in, her silhouette framed by the moonlight, a lantern in one hand, and a smug look that made Jack want to spit. "Morning, Cactus," she said, her tone dripping with mock cheer. "You sleep like a man who trusts too easy." Jack glared, his jaw tight, as he pieced together her betrayal. "You drugged me for what?" "To keep your old man safe," he growled, his voice low but sharp enough to cut through her bravado. Lilly set the lantern down, her smirk fading into something colder, more calculated. "Not quite," she said. "I'm turning him in myself. That $5,000 bounty's mine." Jack's stomach twisted, not just from the betrayal but from the sheer gall of it. She wasn't protecting Sam. She was outplaying him, using her own father as bait to cash in. He tugged harder at the ropes, feeling one knot give slightly, and forced a bitter laugh. "You're a real piece of work, Lilly. Selling out your kin for a payday. That's low, even for this godforsaken country." She crouched in front of him, close enough that he could smell that faint lavender scent again, her eyes glinting with something between defiance and regret. "You think it's about the money," she said. "Sam's been running from bounties and bad choices his whole life. I'm just cutting the rope before he drags me down with him." Outside, the canyon was quiet, save for the distant howl of a coyote and the faint crackle of a fire somewhere nearby. Jack's mind raced, calculating his odds. The ropes were loosening, but Lilly wasn't stupid. She'd tied them tight, and her revolver sat snug in a holster at her hip. He needed to keep her talking, buy time to slip free. "So what's the plan?" he asked, his tone mocking to hide the sting of her betrayal. "Hand me over to Sam as a bonus prize." Lilly stood, brushing dust off her skirt, and gave him a look that said she was 3 steps ahead. "You're not part of the deal, Cactus. But if you're smart, you'll stay out of my way." As she turned to leave, Jack felt the ropes give a little more, his fingers working faster now. Lilly's footsteps faded, and the shed door swung shut with a thud. He was alone, bound, and furious, but a grudging respect flickered in his chest. She'd played him like a fiddle, and he hadn't seen it coming. The bounty on Sam McGraw was still out there, but now Jack had a new target, outsmarting the woman who'd turned his world upside down. Jack's wrists burned as he twisted free from the ropes, the coarse fibers leaving red welts that matched his simmering anger. He stood in the dim shed, rubbing his hands to get the blood flowing, and muttered a string of curses that would have made a saloon drunk blush. Lilly's betrayal stung worse than the ropes, but her audacity, planning to turn in her own father for the $5,000 bounty, lit a strange spark of admiration in him. He kicked the shed door open, the hinges groaning, and stepped into the cool canyon night, his eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of her. The campfire's embers glowed faintly, abandoned, with Lilly's horse gone from the makeshift corral. Jack's own mount stood tethered nearby, oblivious to the mess its rider had stumbled into. He checked his revolver, still miraculously in its holster, and took a moment to steady his breathing. "Women and whiskey," he grumbled, spitting into the dirt. "Both'll kill you faster than a bullet." But even as he cursed her name, he couldn't shake the image of Lilly's smirk, that mix of defiance and cunning that made her more dangerous than any outlaw he'd ever chased. He saddled up, his movements quick but deliberate, and set out toward the faint trail leading deeper into the canyon. Lilly had a head start, but Jack knew these kinds of games. Bounty hunting wasn't just about tracking a man. It was about outthinking the ones who thought they'd outthought you. Sam McGraw wasn't the monster the posters made him out to be, just a loud, washed-up thief who'd probably spent more time dodging debts than robbing banks. Jack's anger at Lilly was tempered by a nagging question. Why was she so eager to sell out her own blood? The trail wound through narrow rock walls, the moonlight casting jagged shadows that played tricks on his eyes. He kept his horse at a steady pace, ears sharp for any sound, a snapped twig, a whispered plan. Lilly's words echoed in his head. Sam was a man who'd made bad choices, dragging her down with him. Jack got that. Hell, he'd made plenty of bad calls himself, chasing bounties instead of a life that didn't leave him sleeping under stars with a gun for a pillow, but turning on family. That was a line he'd never crossed, and it made him wonder what kind of life Lilly was running from. As the canyon opened into a wider stretch, Jack spotted a faint glow ahead. A campfire, likely Sam's. His mission hadn't changed. Find McGraw, collect the reward. But now it wasn't just about the money. Lilly had turned this into a game of wits, and Jack wasn't about to let her win. He dismounted, tying his horse to a scrubby tree, and crept closer, his boots silent on the rocky ground. If he could outsmart her, maybe he'd figure out what drove a woman like Lilly to play such a ruthless hand, and whether he could still trust the tug in his chest that hadn't stopped pulling him toward her. Jack crouched behind a boulder, the faint glow of a campfire illuminating a rickety cabin nestled against the canyon wall. Sam McGraw was inside, his shadow moving across the warped boards, a bottle in one hand and a slurred song on his lips. Jack's fingers rested on his revolver, but his mind was still tangled in Lilly's betrayal, her plan to claim the $5,000 bounty for herself. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of pine and smoke, and Jack's breath came steady as he weighed his next move. He edged closer, keeping low, when Sam's voice boomed out, loud enough to wake half the canyon. "Who's skulking out there? Show yourself 'fore I blast you to kingdom come." Jack froze, cursing the man's timing, then stood slowly, hands raised but close to his gun. "Easy, McGraw," he called, stepping into the firelight. "Just a man looking to talk." Sam squinted, his scar-twisted face looking more tired than dangerous, his gray beard flecked with whiskey. "Cactus Kane, ain't it?" he said, lowering his shotgun with a chuckle. "Heard you was sniffing around my trail." Jack kept his distance, noting the cabin's sagging roof and the empty bottles scattered around like fallen soldiers. Sam wasn't the bloodthirsty outlaw the posters painted, just a loudmouth past his prime, drowning his failures in cheap liquor. $5,000 says you're worth catching," Jack said, his tone even but testing. Sam laughed, a deep, raspy sound, and waved him inside. "Sit, boy. Let's jaw before you try hauling me in." Against his better judgment, Jack stepped into the cabin, the air thick with the stench of unwashed clothes and regret. Sam slumped into a chair, offering Jack a swig from his bottle, which he declined with a shake of his head. "Got a deal for you," Sam said, his eyes glinting with something between mischief and desperation. "Forget the bounty. Marry my Lilly, take her out of this Dust Bowl life. She's worth more than any reward." Jack nearly choked, his laugh sharp and disbelieving. "Marriage. That's your pitch. I'd sooner wrestle a cougar." But Sam's face stayed serious, his voice dropping low. "She's smarter than both of us, Kane. Deserves better than this." Before Jack could answer, hoofbeats thundered outside, followed by shouts and the unmistakable clatter of rifles being cocked. A posse, 6 men, maybe 7, swarmed the clearing, their torches casting wild shadows. "McGraw, come out or we burn you out," one bellowed, his voice all business. Jack's gut twisted. This wasn't his doing, and Lilly's absence felt like a missing piece in a bad puzzle. Sam grabbed his shotgun, cursing, while Jack's hand hovered over his revolver. "Friends of yours?" Sam asked, his grin bitter. Jack shook his head, his mind racing. Someone had tipped off the posse, and he had a sinking feeling Lilly's hand was all over it. Jack ducked behind the cabin's splintered wall as the posse's shouts echoed through the canyon, their torchlight flickering like a storm about to break. Sam McGraw crouched beside him, clutching his shotgun, his bloodshot eyes darting between fear and defiance. The $5,000 bounty on Sam's head had drawn these men like vultures to a carcass, but Jack's gut screamed that Lilly's hand was in this mess, her betrayal sharper than ever. He peered through a crack in the boards, counting 7 riders, their rifles glinting under the moon, and cursed the night for turning his hunt into a circus. "McGraw, you got 10 seconds, the posse leader bellowed, his voice rough as gravel. Jack glanced at Sam, who looked less like a feared outlaw and more like a tired old man caught in a bad dream. Before Jack could speak, hooves crunched outside, and Lilly's voice cut through the chaos, cool and commanding. "Hold your fire, boys. I'm the one who called you here." Jack's heart sank, not from surprise, but from the sting of her playing him again. She stepped into the torchlight, her riding skirt dusty but her posture regal, like she owned the canyon and everyone in it. "Lilly, what the hell you doing?" Sam growled, his voice cracking as he stood, ignoring Jack's warning to stay low. Lilly faced her father, her expression a mix of resolve and something softer, almost sad. "I brought them for the bounty, Pa," she said, loud enough for the posse to hear. $5,000 to start fresh, away from your mistakes." Jack's jaw tightened, his fingers brushing his revolver, but her words hit harder than any bullet. She'd sold out her own father, but the regret in her eyes told him it wasn't just about the money. Jack stepped out, hands raised but close to his gun, drawing the posse's attention. "She's got you boys chasing her game," he called, his voice steady despite the rifles aimed his way. "Sam's no killer, just a loud drunk with bad luck." The posse leader squinted, sizing him up while Lilly shot Jack a look that could have sparked a fire. "Stay out of this, Cactus," she snapped, but her voice wavered, like she hadn't planned on him being here. Jack ignored her, his mind racing. Sam didn't deserve a noose, not like this, and Lilly's double cross was starting to feel like a desperate bid for freedom. The posse shifted, restless, their leader barking for Sam to surrender. Jack's code as a bounty hunter demanded he deliver his quarry, but the pull of Lilly's defiance, her willingness to burn her own bridges, made him question what that code was worth. He met her gaze, seeing the woman who drugged him, outsmarted him, and still made his heart lurch. "You really think this ends clean?" he asked her, low enough for only her to hear. Lilly's lips parted, but no answer came, just a flicker of doubt that told him she was in deeper than she'd planned. Dust swirled down Red Gulch's main street as Jack faced Sam McGraw under the noon sun, the townsfolk crowding the boardwalks like buzzards waiting for a meal. The so-called duel had started as a half-baked plan to settle things without bloodshed, but now it felt like a farce, with Sam swaying from last night's whiskey and Jack dodging a stray chicken that had wandered into the fray. The $5,000 bounty still hung over Sam's head, but the posse, now lounging by the saloon, seemed more amused than bloodthirsty. Lilly stood on the saloon steps, her arms crossed, her smirk sharp enough to cut leather. Jack had called for this showdown to buy time, hoping to talk sense into the posse, or at least confuse them enough to back off. "You ready to dance, old man?" he shouted, his hand hovering near his revolver, more for show than intent. Sam hiccuped, his shotgun dangling loosely, and hollered back, "I'd rather drink than shoot, Cactus, but you're ruining my day." The crowd chuckled, and someone tossed a rotten tomato that splattered on the dirt near Jack's boots, prompting a glare that silenced the laughter. The street was a stage, and Jack played his part, keeping one eye on Lilly, whose presence was a distraction he couldn't afford. She'd tipped off the posse, but her plan had unraveled when Jack convinced them Sam was worth more alive for questioning than dead in a ditch. Now the duel was less about guns and more about who could outtalk whom. "You're no outlaw, Sam," Jack called, stepping closer, his voice loud for the crowd. "Just a fool who forgot when to quit." Sam grinned, slurring, "And you're a fool chasing my daughter's smile instead of my bounty." A murmur rippled through the crowd, and Lily's smirk faltered, her eyes locking onto Jack's with a mix of defiance and something softer, unguarded. Before Jack could respond, a kid in the crowd yelled, "Shoot already," and the chicken squawked, flapping into Sam's path. He stumbled, cursing, and his shotgun went off, blasting a hole in a nearby water barrel. Water sprayed everywhere, soaking the posse leader, who roared with laughter instead of anger. The crowd erupted, some cheering, others jeering, turning the duel into a spectacle no one took seriously. Jack seized the moment, holstering his gun and striding toward Sam, who was now tangled in his own spurs. "This ain't worth dying for," Jack said, low enough for only Sam to hear. The old man nodded, his eyes clearer than before, and muttered, "Never was." Lily watched from the steps, her expression unreadable, but Jack felt her gaze like a brand. The posse, still chuckling, seemed to forget the bounty entirely, distracted by the chaos. Jack had turned a deadly standoff into a town joke, but the real question lingered. What would Lily do now that her plan had gone up in smoke? The Red Gulch saloon was near empty as Jack sat across from Sam McGraw, the two sharing a bottle of whiskey that tasted more like regret than liquor. Lily had vanished at dawn, taking the $5,000 bounty money after the posse, still laughing from yesterday's botched duel, handed it over without much fuss. She'd left a note pinned to the saloon door. "San Francisco's calling. Don't follow." Jack's fingers traced the bottle's label, his chest heavy with a mix of relief and something sharper, like a splinter he couldn't dig out. The town felt quieter without her, the dust settling as if it knew the show was over. Sam slouched in his chair, his gray beard flecked with crumbs from a biscuit he'd scrounged earlier. "She's always been a storm," he said, his voice rough but fond. "Took after her ma. Too smart for this life." Jack nodded, taking a slow sip, his eyes on the scratched table where Lily's laugh seemed to linger like a ghost. He'd been outplayed, and not just by her scheme to claim the bounty. She'd gotten under his skin, made him question the lonely trail he'd ridden for years, and then walked away without looking back. Outside, the street was dark, save for a lone lantern swinging above the general store. Jack leaned back, his spurs scraping the floor, and tried to piece together what had happened. Lily had turned the posse's greed against them, convincing them to take the reward money and leave Sam alive, claiming he'd lead them to bigger scores. It was a lie, of course. Sam was broke, his outlaw days long gone, but Lily's charm had sold it. Jack couldn't help but admire her hustle, even if it left him with nothing but a sore heart and an empty pocket. "You ever think about quitting this bounty game?" Sam asked, echoing Lily's question from days ago. Jack snorted, the irony bitter as the whiskey. "Thought about it today," he admitted, his voice low. "But then what? Ain't much for a man like me outside of chasing trouble." Sam chuckled, raising his glass. "Trouble's what keeps us breathing, Cactus. Lily, though, she's chasing something else." Jack's jaw tightened, knowing Sam was right. Lily wasn't running from him or her father. She was running toward a life where the dust didn't choke her dreams. As the night dragged on, Jack drained the last of the whiskey, the bottle clinking against the table. Red Gulch felt smaller now, its wooden facades less like a stage and more like a cage. He'd let Lily go, not because he couldn't follow, but because he knew she'd outrun him in more ways than one. Standing, he tipped his hat to Sam, who gave a tired nod. "Take care of yourself, old man," Jack said, stepping into the cool night air, the horizon dark but calling. He was broke, alone, and strangely at peace with it, wondering if love had played him for a fool or set him free. Jack Cactus Kane rode out of Red Gulch as the sun peeked over the horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold that felt more like a taunt than a promise. His saddlebags were lighter than when he'd arrived. No $5,000 bounty, no Lily. Just the weight of his own thoughts dragging like an anchor. Sam's parting words echoed in his head. "Love's the real reward, boy, even if it stings worse than a scorpion." Jack snorted, adjusting his hat against the morning glare, and muttered to himself, "Love's a damn thief, and I'm the fool who left the door open." The trail stretched ahead, endless and dusty, the kind of road that made a man question why he kept riding. Jack's horse plodded steadily, its hooves kicking up small clouds that settled behind him like forgotten promises. He'd spent years chasing bounties, each one a step away from something he couldn't name, but Lilly's departure had cracked that routine wide open. Her smirk, her sharp tongue, the way she'd played him, and the posse like a deck of marked cards, it all lingered, making the silence of the plains feel louder than ever. He stopped by a dry creek bed to water his horse, the air already warming as the sun climbed higher. Leaning against a scrubby tree, he pulled out a crumpled cigarette and lit it, the smoke curling upward like a question he couldn't answer. Sam had stayed behind in Red Gulch, free for now, but Jack knew the old man's days of running were numbered. As for Lilly, she was halfway to San Francisco, chasing a life that didn't include dust or drunks or men like him. He exhaled, watching the smoke dissolve, and wondered if he envied her or pitied himself. The horizon called, as it always did, but this time it felt different. Less like a destination and more like a mirror. Jack had no bounty, no plan, just a revolver, and a code that seemed shakier by the mile. Soft as a damn cactus flower, he grumbled, flicking the cigarette into the dirt and grinding it under his boot. He mounted up, the leather creaking under his weight, and spurred his horse forward. Red Gulch was behind him, but the question of what became of Jack, Cactus Kane, rode alongside, as persistent as the dust that clung to his coat. The dust settled on the trail behind Jack, Cactus Kane, as he rode into the endless stretch of desert, his shadow long and lonely under a fading sun. Red Gulch was just a memory now, a speck on the map where love and betrayal had danced a jagged waltz, leaving him with nothing but a sore heart and a story to tell. The horizon stretched wide, whispering promises it might not keep, and Jack's spurs jingled softly, like the last notes of a saloon piano fading into the night. Whatever lay ahead for him, another bounty, another town, another chance to lose himself in the chase. It was a tale for another day, another campfire, another bottle of whiskey shared with strangers who might listen. And that, folks, brings us to the end of Jack's ride through Red Gulch, where the line between duty and desire got blurred like a mirage in the heat. I hope you've enjoyed this dusty trail as much as I've enjoyed spinning it for you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for saddling up with us, for lending your ears to this tale of grit, heart, and a woman who could outsmart a fox in a henhouse. Whether you're listening from a bustling city or a quiet corner of the world, your time means more than a sack of gold in a prospector's pan. So tell me, where are you tuning in from today? Got a favorite saloon or a dusty trail of your own you're itching to share? Now, let's chew on this story a bit. What do you reckon Jack's next move is? Will he chase Lilly to San Francisco, hunting a love that slipped through his fingers, or stick to the lonesome bounty trail that's all he's ever known? And what about Lilly? Did she play the game right, cutting ties to build a new life, or did she trade one cage for another? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because I'm curious as a coyote sniffing out supper. If you like this tale, give it a nod with a like, share it with your posse, and maybe subscribe so you don't miss the next adventure. Until then, keep your boots on the ground and your eyes on the horizon. Who knows what story's waiting just beyond the next ridge.